welcome to Leading the Frontline, sponsored by Legion. Thank you so much for being here. And by the way, if you haven't yet, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this episode. We have a fabulous episode for you today, and I think that you're going to love hearing from this particular person because I know I certainly do. So whether you're watching or listening, you're going to have a fabulous experience either way, which is something that we always guarantee here over at Leading the Frontline. So let me introduce you to Ryan Holm, who is the Divisional Vice President of Retail Innovation and Operations at Helzberg, where he leverages his firsthand knowledge of the front lines to serve as a voice for innovative technology, new partnerships, and process improvements. With 11 years of experience in retail fine jewelry, Ryan has held leadership roles at Signet Jewelers and Helzberg. And previously, he spent a decade in the quick service restaurant industry, where he managed a franchise of Dunkin Donuts and Baskin-Robbins locations, some of my favorite quick service restaurant places, by the way. It's nice when you can get a coffee and a cake or ice cream at the same time. Ryan is known for bringing an analytical and practical approach to store teams and a deeply human approach to developers. He often serves as a translator between developers and end users, helping ensure that both parties better understand, appreciate, and respect each other's roles. He ensures developers know what to build and stores understand how to use new tools to achieve their goals. He focuses on ensuring that his organization incentivizes, let me take that sentence one more time. He focuses on ensuring that his organization incentivizes behaviors that lead to the desired business outcomes and that everyone throughout the organization is aligned with a shared vision and rewarded for success. This bridge-building role that Ryan has found himself in has led him to frequently participating in speaking engagements, participating in case studies, and quickly gaining a following on LinkedIn. I am one of those followers. Outside of work, Ryan enjoys running, wilderness backpacking, and good food, and is passionate about technology being used to better humanity. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
That was quite the intro. Thanks, Traci.
You're welcome. Hey, this is your life, so I think it's really fabulous that you've done all of these things. And I think it's really equally as important to hear it read back, so that you can reflect on all of the things that you have done throughout your years.
Sometimes hearing your retail career journey spelled out like that feels foreign because I think most of us in retail didn't really have a plan to go into retail. And so then, things happen and evolve along the way.
It's so true. As a former retailer myself, I can totally co-sign that you just are like, oh yeah, wait, no, I do like this. Maybe there's something to make from this career. Oh, wait, there is. And then you just keep going. And it's like,
Exactly.
you don't have that gray area. It's either you love retail or you just cannot be a retailer.
It's a sticky industry. Absolutely.
Totally. Well, there at the Frontline, Leading the Frontline podcast, there are two questions that I always start off with any guest. And so you, unfortunately, are not absolved of this. You get to answer the same questions because it helps all of the listeners better understand you and get to know you. So the first question, which is really my favorite, is what was your very first hourly job?
It's also I love that question. It's great. So my first hourly job was actually at Dunkin Donuts. I was 16 years old. And I remember wanting to be able to buy a vehicle, but I had no job. And so there was a Dunkin Donuts opening. It was about 3/4 of a mile from my childhood home. And so while it was still being built, I would go walk there on a weekly basis and just bang on the back door trying to turn in an application. And so I was the last hire for this. At the moment, they were just like, hey, we're going to open on this date, show up at this time for training. And I showed up in a pair of jeans and got sent home because no one told me the dress code. So
Love that.
it was fun.
Thanks, HR. I can say that because I'm in HR. Thanks, HR. Thanks for letting us know. But I mean, you are definitely not the only person to have had that type of experience where you're like, I'm eager. I know exactly what I need to do to purchase a car. I need money. And in order to get money, I need a job. And in order to get a job, I need someone to look at my resume. And in order to have someone look at my resume, I need to have a resume. I need to go there, right? So all of this retro planning happens for anyone in that situation. But also, it's totally a relatable experience, I think, being sent home. And you're probably like, well, why didn't anyone tell me about the dress code? I could have stayed. I would have been prepared.
It would have been great. It all worked out in the end. I got to come back the next day wearing a proper pair of khakis and got a uniform, and all was well. But I've now learned, when you start a new job, you talk about the dress code during the interview, or, whatever your form of an interview is.
Totally, totally. I was gonna say, isn't it so like symbolic, I should say, of what leadership can be like and is sometimes like, that we're like, yeah, this person's starting, like they know exactly what to expect, and then they come in knowing exactly what they thought to expect because of what someone, their leader or whomever, communicated to them, and they come in having zero expectations met, and then you're like, wait a second, that was on me. Yeah. Okay.
It
Got it.
feels a little foreshadowy to the rest of my career where communication has become increasingly important.
Yes, totally, totally. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit, considering your passion around technology and things like that. But it's funny because I think sometimes we advance in technology and we just like fully rely on it, but we still have all of those same basic needs for communication to and from, like as a two-way street. And so I'm sure we'll get there.
100%.
I'm sure. And if not, you'll remind me. But also, do you mind sharing a little bit more about your background and what led you to ultimately to your current leadership role?
Yeah, it's always a difficult thing to summarize, but I spent 10 years at that job at Dunkin Donuts.
Wow.
I was there, as an hourly employee, and then I graduated high school and I got offered a store, and I said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go to college. And they said, we offer tuition reimbursement. And I said, great. I hadn't thought about how I was going to handle that yet, so sign me up. And that was my job in college. And by the time I left, I was overseeing 13 stores in Northeast Ohio. And at that point it was a franchise, right? And I was 26 years old, and what else was I going to do, right? You were kind of at the top. I couldn't really go any higher than that. And I knew I wasn't done growing. And so I decided to pivot, and I happened to be in the backyard of one of the largest retail jewelers headquarters in Akron, Ohio. And so I jumped and started in jewelry, and I'll never forget my interview that day. Off the cuff, this guy who I had my resume said, where are you working now? And I said, Dunkin Donuts. And he said, oh, so you're going to move from sprinkles to sparkles. And the tagline just stuck.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I've had a 10-year career now in jewelry. And I think a pivotal moment to moving into this leadership role I'm in now happened pretty early on in that 10 years, which is I was watching as people were selling engagement rings and getting this immense level of satisfaction. And I got it a little, and at first I kind of had this imposter syndrome, like, maybe this isn't for me. I'm not getting the same satisfaction. Like, it feels great to celebrate love with this customer and, successful sale. I'm glad they chose us to buy their engagement ring. But what I really got that feeling I was watching others get was when I was identifying processes that could be improved. And so what I knew early on was that that's where my passion lied. If I could improve a process or implement a new tool or make it better, I could free up all of this administrative burden from these people who were really, really good with connecting with customers on an emotional level. And that's what they were passionate about. So if I could give them more time to do that, I got that same sense of pride and reward I was watching them do from selling a diamond ring. And so now here's the role I find myself in, is trying to make leaders' lives more efficient.
That's amazing. And also, I have to give credit where credit is due, not only to you for being like, okay, I can totally translate my skills from sprinkles to sparkles, but also for the person who interviewed you in seeing that, because so much time, I think, is wasted when leaders are so only focused on, okay, this person has to have this background, this experience. I mean, we see it in every industry. This is not just retail, not just, any industry. Really, I think it's prevalent. And so when I was reading your bio, even before I read it here live on air, I was like, oh, there's a story there. There's something that we have to take away from that, because there is so much potential in people to begin with. And when you can see that there are transferable skills, regardless of someone's experience or background or industry experience, then you have the ability for them to then translate those skills, learn about a new industry, and apply those new learnings and skills. And so I did want to mention that because I think it shouldn't be so unique, but it is. It can be very challenging for people to pivot from one industry to another, even though both are retail.
Agreed. I think what's really interesting about retail jewelry is I think a lot I've watched over my career as we've hired new people in who have this notion that like, well, I don't know enough about diamonds. And there is a whole vast world of diamonds and gemology and metallurgy and all of that that you can go down a rabbit hole of. But jewelry knowledge doesn't sell jewelry. Like Google can answer those questions probably better than the best like gemologist that I know. What sells jewelry is the ability to emotionally connect with someone who you are connecting multiple layers deep, right? It's not just about getting to know them, but through them getting to know their love story and the recipient, the person that they are trying to purchase for, and really just making them feel seen and heard, and then using a little bit of that knowledge to try and connect that story to a product.
Totally. It's all about the relationship. I love that. I think that's a fabulous takeaway. And it makes me wonder a little bit about your leadership style and if you have a similar outlook or how maybe even your leadership style has evolved over time and your experiences in Sprinkles to Sparkles, which I totally love, by the way, also. I think that's a great tagline. But yeah, how would you describe your leadership style?
I think for me, I will say I've always appreciated the phrasing my boss says all the time, that things should always be on a low simmer, right? Not boiling over and not, just sitting there tepid, but really like this feeling of like something's happening, right? And I think for me in my career, I've always been focused on the what's next and succession planning. So another way to say it would be this idea that our best days are ahead of us. And I think for me, focusing on what matters to those that have been in my charge has been really important to me.
That's awesome. You know, it makes me reflect on the last sentence that I even read in your bio, which is that you're passionate about technology being used to better humanity. And certainly this is not only important to you, but probably a passion of yours. What does that mean when you say technology as a way to better humanity?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think I believed that long before tech was at all part of my career. And eventually I found myself in this place where those two things, what was my hobby for many years and interest outside of work, and then my work kind of became one and the same. I think right now it's a difficult conversation to have because of AI. There are those who are very deep into this idea that AI is going to save humanity, and those who are very anti-AI and don't even want to interact with it because they see it, potentially changing the landscape. But I think long before the AI era, even this notion of like being able to, I remember like Palm Pilots were a thing. You could organize your life without having to carry paper around, right?
Totally.
And like at the time, I mean, I'm giving away my age here, but I would have been like high school and college at the time. And I remember really wanting to figure out how to use a stylus and make that part of my life because I always believed that technology could help make things better and easier for us.
I love that. I mean, like any tool, right? I'm sure at some point someone was really concerned about the advent of the hammer or an axe, right?
Yeah.
But when we think about the way that tools have evolved over time, and specifically in many cases technology has evolved over time, it's how we use them and what we do with this new technology or these new tools that can really kind of help us stand out even from our competitors potentially in a pretty competitive landscape, whether it's retail, hospitality, or any other industry. So I really totally subscribe to that belief that you have. I think it's pretty awesome. And I'm curious if like throughout your career, if there are any hard lessons that you have taken along the way, like is there anything that, whether it's a mistake or even something that was just kind of hard learned, any leadership or otherwise, any lessons that you've learned along your career?
I think the biggest thing is not actually technology related, but the importance of really thinking through, before you make any sort of decision, really thinking about each individual on your team and giving, even if it's not a long time, but thinking through each individual and how they are going to react to the news of that change, and to really give it thought about, is this fair to this individual? How do they need to hear about this change and this message? And there have been times where, as my leadership scope has grown, it's easy to have those people who are more vocal and top of mind come into your head about communicating a change. And there was one specific time where I left out someone who was a key player and how they were going to react to a change. And thankfully, this person was very transparent and honest with me about how it affected them. And, it really took me a minute to sit and process that, like, oh, you're right. I should have thought about this. I should have done this differently, and own that. And then, do what I could to make it right in that scenario. But ultimately, it's really just the responsibility of having people in your charge.
Totally. It's not easy to lead people, to have, whether, they directly report into someone or otherwise. I mean, it's really challenging. And then sometimes, I think individual contributors have just as much of a challenge too, because it's all about how they influence those around them. And, your reflection on communication and what that feels like for someone on the receiving end. It can be quite challenging to remember what that looks and feels like as you, to your point, as you grow in scope or scale. And I'm curious if, when you think about your own team, if there's something that maybe your team does differently that sets them apart from other teams, or that you feel has a really significant impact on whether it's Helzberg or customers or, anyone potentially interacting with your team.
That's a really great question. I think what I've found is different at Helzberg is this notion of aligning incentives with what is right for the customer and the associate and the company, and having all three of those things really be in alignment with each other. And I think the fact that so much thought goes into that has led us to a place where we have incredible tenure. I'm 10 years in at Helzberg, and I can't tell you how often I'm in a room where I'm the new guy.
Wow.
And it's unbelievable. Wow. It's amazing. My boss has been with Helzberg for 36 years now.
Oh my gosh, wow.
We were the first customer sponsor to Legion Cab, and the store manager that hosted for us has been with Helzberg for 29 years, and it was incredible getting to introduce her as, like, she's going to be celebrating 30 years next year at Helzberg. So, I'd say that's a differentiator.
Yeah, I would say so. That's amazing. I mean, you hear so many stories about people who jump around, and that's kind of the way of the world, and really there's nothing wrong with it. And at the same time, when you hear decades of experience, I mean, that is really, really incredible. I'm curious, is it attributed to the culture? Is it attributed to growth opportunities? Is it attributed to, the what each person does at Helzberg? Like, where does that tenure come from?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of facets to that. I think one of them that I'm just going to give credit to our industry, which is that jewelry is a really unique subset of retail, where the customer experience is elevated, right? I mean, you can have a great experience buying a pair of jeans. Someone can listen to you and help you find the perfect product and be amazing. I think it's not uncommon that you're going to forget that interaction in 6 months, a year, 5 years. You don't forget the person you bought your engagement ring from. And so I think because of this notion of, like, forming these lifelong relationships, I think the industry itself helps retain talent, as well as, if you're in a shopping mall, kind of the best place you could be is in a jewelry store, right? Like, everything's behind cases, you're in control of that customer experience. It's an elevated customer experience. Who doesn't want to play with shiny, pretty things for work and celebrate love every day? It's pretty great.
Yeah.
I also think there's just an element to our culture of celebrating and rewarding that tenure, and really, is both an organization that's subscribed to the American Gem Society, which is a organization that's really just there to protect the retail consumer, as well as being a Berkshire Hathaway company. We're really focused on doing the right thing for both customers and our associates. And I think I've seen firsthand where sometimes things can go sideways there, and that's the quickest way to lose people.
Totally. I mean, selfishly, one of my questions too is like, what are the anniversary rewards when you hit 30 years or 35 years or 40 years? But maybe that's a discussion for another time, unless you actually know the answer to those questions.
Not off the
I'm
top
just
of my head.
selfishly so curious. Yeah, no, I get it. Like I said, I mean, it's just when I think about as an HR person myself, like how people are rewarded not only for their contributions, but for their stay power at that rate. It's really incredible. So kudos to you and the team. I mean, that's amazing. Obviously something is going really right there. And I really like how you brought it back to the industry, that there is something so special. And frankly, I mean, jewelry and certainly diamonds and other types of gems are, major investments, sometimes one of the largest investments that people make in their lives. And so I would assume that making that investment with someone that you remember, that you feel comfortable with, that then becomes, someone that you refer to maybe even on a first name basis is, certainly prime for those types of experiences. And you started off our discussion even talking about the sense of fulfillment that people have and that you saw people having, and that you had even yourself. So I think it all totally is coming full circle and makes total sense. And when I shift gears and think about asking you a little bit about the future of frontline work, I'm curious if there are any trends that are maybe shaping the future of frontline leadership, whether it's in the jewelry industry specifically or otherwise, and maybe not even just shaping the future of frontline leadership, but also just team performance.
AI is the obvious one, right? It's what we all love to talk about these days. But what I'm finding fascinating is AI is becoming less of a buzzword, which I appreciate. It's more about practicality, right? How does this actually fit in and provide value? So I think there was a period of time where across the industry you were seeing on the tech side, the solution provider side, people saying, well, we're AI first, and we have that. They're like AI just so that they seem relevant. And on the retailer side, you're getting executives. I'm sure you've seen the meme of like, what do we want? AI, why do we want it? We don't know. That was that way for a couple of years now, and I think we're now at a place where everyone's kind of got their heads wrapped around it, and no one wants AI for the sake of AI. We're trying to figure out where it actually provides value. And I think that makes this year and probably even next really exciting to figure out, to sort through that noise of just tagging AI on something and saying it's better because of that. But actually, what are the real ways that this provides value?
Totally. There's nothing more sacred than the time that someone spends as a manager or an employee on the floor, so to speak, with a customer, with others, and getting some time back is always, it's always valuable, always. Just a couple other questions for you. I mean, the first is a question that we ask pretty much everyone. Actually, no, we definitely ask everyone. What is the best advice that you have ever received and continue to live by?
Oh, all right. It was actually from a book called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lenciati. And he says that the whole premise of the book, which is, I highly recommend, it's a very fast read. You could blow through it in a day easily. Is told in the premise of a story. And the idea is that the best teams have three things. Every person on the team exemplifies being humble, hungry, and smart. And he uses smart in the term of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And it's something that I've used through the course of my career to really find that balance of really building a great team. Is everyone has to know, where their strengths and weaknesses fall in those three places. And what's beautiful about it is if you are missing one, being able to have that common language around those three traits to be able to know how that is affecting the team and how you can work on it to bring that to the team I think is really beneficial, and it's helped me a lot in some of the more difficult team dynamics I've managed.
Amazing. I love that. Maybe we should link that book for all of the listeners. I'm going to have to visit it myself. I've never read it actually, but I really like that sentiment that, first of all, I think humility is really important. I think all of those things are really important, but humility is one of those things that when it's not there, it's very apparent. And when it is, you're like, oh yeah, this is a good experience, either as a coworker, as a direct report, or as a manager. So I really can appreciate. Also, you came up with that so quickly, so you obviously certainly keep it at the forefront of your mind. So I think that's awesome.
It's something where anytime I found myself in a difficult position where I find that I'm frustrated, or I can see that others are frustrated with something I'm doing, I kind of back up and check myself and think about those three traits.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. And as I promised, the last question that I have for you is pretty easy. And that is, where can people follow you, see your work, connect with you? Of course, you have quite a following on LinkedIn, but maybe it's a good opportunity to tell everyone where they can find you on LinkedIn also.
LinkedIn, and then obviously the other place would be go visit a Helzberg Diamond store if you've got one near you. We've got 160 stores nationwide. We actually have 2 brand new beautiful concept stores, one in the Dallas Galleria Mall, which is opening next week, and then one in Roosevelt Field.
Roosevelt Field is one of my locals. I'm going to have to go over there. If you ever pay a visit to the store, let me know. I'm on Long Island. I'll go over there.
Wonderful, will do. Yeah, for NRF, I think we're trying to organize a little store tour, so maybe in January.
Yes, you definitely should do that. Roosevelt Field is a huge mall, and some of the best and brightest are there, I think. Amazing.
Agreed.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much. And it's really been a pleasure getting to know more about you and your career experience, your journey. And I'm sure all the listeners are going to love getting connected with you, especially on LinkedIn or visiting any of those 160 stores or new gorgeous concept stores, which I will certainly go and visit sometime soon. And for everyone listening, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are catching this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Ryan, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Traci.